back to the Foreign Desk podcast. I'm Lisa Daftari. Today we have a topic that's not so, I should say, celebratory, but nonetheless, we've been following this for a year. We're talking about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. We brought this guest on, a very, very special guest because of his access, because of his perspective on watching the withdrawal from Afghanistan, watching the country change in the past year. We brought him on right after the U.S. had withdrew from Afghanistan last August, and we're bringing him back again today to talk about all the changes we're seeing on the ground as the Taliban take over that country. I'd like to welcome back to the show Ali Maisam Nazary, who is currently the National Resistance Front's Foreign Relations head. He has a very unique perspective, as I said, in having really being the liaison for such an important group of Afghan fighters. These are the Afghan people. These are the fighters who were on the ground. They were part of the former military, part of the former government, and risking their lives to save their country, to fight for their country, and stay back and not leave their country. Welcome back to the program, Ali.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's great to be back, and I'm looking forward to a productive show today. I'm willing to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you. I mean, my first question to you is obviously, describe for us what you're seeing from your perspective in terms of the changes you've seen in the last year. I mean, what does the country look like? What are some of the major changes you've seen? And just describe what's going on over there.
Well, to summarize what we've seen in the past year is everything we predicted, everything we forecasted a year ago came true. Last year, when we kept warning the international community, when we kept warning everyone not to trust the Taliban is still a terrorist group. They're going to turn Afghanistan into a sanctuary for international terrorism. They're going to be a threat to global security. They're going to oppress women. They're going to violate human rights. They're going to start committing atrocities and war crimes. And they're not going to be able to govern Afghanistan, and will cause the economy to collapse and will create a humanitarian crisis. Everything we said a year ago came true today. It's been a year, and now everyone is starting to realize what we've predicted more than a year ago, and especially after August 15th, when the Republic fell and the Taliban terrorists came to power. Yet, we are optimistic today. We see hope in the horizon. In the past year, our organization, the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, has been able to expand without any international support, any country coming to our aid. We've been able to achieve so much, show our competence, and challenge the Taliban to a point where they are facing strategic defeat, especially in northern Afghanistan.
There's so much to unpack here, but first let me start with, I gave a very loose description of what the National Resistance Front is. In your own words, what is this group exactly? What's their goal? Who is it comprised of, etc.?
The National Resistance Front, or the acronym NRF, is the last remaining anti-terrorist forces, the last remaining democratic forces in the country, fighting for a democratic republic, fighting for a decentralized political system, fighting for the rights of every single citizen inside Afghanistan in order to create a society, a pluralistic society, where every single citizen, regardless of race, religion, and gender, will enjoy equal rights. At the same time, we're the last remaining forces fighting against the Taliban terrorists, regional terrorist groups, and international terrorist groups who are inside Afghanistan, who have presence inside the country. Our organization is led by Ahmad Massoud. He's the son of the late Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was assassinated 2 days before 9/11 by Al-Qaeda. And he's someone educated in London, had received military training in Sandhurst Military Academy, and then pursued undergraduate and graduate studies in the UK. Someone clean who wasn't involved in the corruption of the past 20 years, and someone who has shown strong leadership in the past year. He's been able to sustain the amount of forces he had a year ago. Not only was he able to sustain them, but to expand his reach, expand his forces, and today successfully challenged the Taliban, something that the coalition forces more than a year ago and Afghanistan's former ANSF was unable to do. And now we believe that it was because of the weak leadership and the flawed strategy that that existed back then.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I wanted to get to. In that last year when we spoke, it was mainly about the resistance front trying to roll up their sleeves and not give up and keep pushing back the Taliban. But obviously, the headlines tell us that the Taliban not only are able or have been able to make their reign on the country legitimate, it's been recognized by the international community. They're getting aid from the United States. They gave them about 55 million or so extra for the earthquake that probably never went to the people of Afghanistan, and in total gave them $1 billion over the last 365 days, based on investigative reporting. This is not something that the administration shows off so openly. Maybe when it comes to the earthquake they did, but obviously it's not something they want to show off because I think the average person is becoming aware of the fact that it's going to the Taliban. I mean, what are the chances that the National Front has at this point when there is this much legitimacy given to a terror group like the Taliban?
Well, we do face challenges, but we have faced such challenges before, where we were left all alone, abandoned. Last time was from 1992 to 2001. The international community ignored Afghanistan, and for years we fought against international terrorism all alone, and we were able to sustain our resistance and to contain the Taliban and their terrorist allies. So we're confident enough that we will be able to liberate our country regardless of the international community's position vis-a-vis Afghanistan. But what's important is that the threat inside Afghanistan isn't only directed towards Afghanistan's people, but we're seeing a legitimate threat emanating from Afghanistan to global security. And we saw what happened last time when Afghanistan was ignored and there was engagement and interaction with the Taliban back in the 1990s. I don't have to repeat myself or explain this. Everyone knows this, especially your watchers in the United States, how international terrorism used that opportunity to take root in Afghanistan and start planning attacks in the region, and especially on US soil on 9/11 and after that as well.
To my point before, I mean, how important will it be to get support from the United States, and frankly, why aren't you getting it? I think that's the astounding thing. We did an exclusive piece, again, to the same point. We did an exclusive piece at the Foreign Desk. We reached out. There was a story about the National Resistance Front being able to take over in Baghlan province. It was a story that I think we reached out to you and your organization for comments about this, and so the Foreign Desk reached out to the State Department and said, we want comments about this. We did not expect this at all. We were floored by the response. But the State Department said, we are monitoring the recent uptick in violence closely. We call on all sides to exercise restraint and to engage. This is the only way Afghanistan can confront its many challenges. We want to see the emergence of a stable and sustainable political suspension via peaceful means. And that the U.S. is not supporting organized violent opposition to the Taliban, and we would discourage other powers from doing so as well. Oh my God. Not only are they equating both sides, to each other, the resistance forces and a terror organization, the Taliban, but they're calling on any opposition to the Taliban to stop and for any international support for your organization to stop as well. This is going beyond staying neutral. This is defending the Taliban against any opposition.
Yes, of course. And let me explain one thing to your viewers. One is The NRF's military wing is made up of the former ANSF personnel. All of those soldiers and officers and personnel who were trained, funded, and advised by the US and other NATO countries for the past 20 years. These people did not flee the country. These people did not abandon the fight. On August 15th, as the Republic collapsed and the Taliban entered Kabul, thousands of ANSF forces went into Panjshir in the north and declared the resistance. When Commander Ahmad Massoud went from Kabul to Panjshir, he gathered all these forces, and together they declared the National Resistance Front. They formed the National Resistance Front and pledged their allegiance to Ahmad Massoud. So it's the same forces who were fighting the Taliban and international terrorists before August 15th. They've just continued their fight, their resistance, under a new banner. Why? Why was this fight? Why was this resistance righteous and legitimate before August 15th, when the United States and NATO was present inside the country? Why is it delegitimized today? Why is it being condemned today? This is something that we do not understand. Why was it righteous more than a year ago and not today? It's the same forces who are fighting the Taliban. It's the same enemies. We haven't changed the enemies.
What if you had to answer your own question? Why is it?
Well, I don't have the answer, because for me, it's confusing. I am confused why such a position. And it's not only a specific country. There's many countries around the globe who have the same position today, especially countries who did fund, train, and advise these forces for 20 years. And one thing that I want to point out, Lisa, is that our current fight isn't a civil war, especially for Americans who are viewing this program. We are not fighting a civil war. When we have Arabs attacking us, terrorists speaking Arabic from the Middle East and North Africa, Chechens, Uyghurs, South Asians, Central Asians, and terrorists from all over the Muslim world, we cannot characterize this as a civil war. This is the continuation of the global war on terror. And after August 15th, the global war on terror did not end. It's just the United States and other NATO countries, they abandoned the global war on terror. And the NRF is the last remaining anti-terrorist fighters continuing the global war on terror today. So this is why we're asking for an international effort, international supports for our resistance, because this resistance isn't only for Afghanistan security. It's for global security today. It's to prevent terrorist attacks throughout the globe in the future. If we do not prevent, if we do not contain terrorism and eradicate terrorists inside Afghanistan today, it's going to become a global problem tomorrow and in the future for us.
Speaking of a global problem with terrorism, we're on the eve of perhaps hearing about an Iran nuclear deal at any moment that will free up billions of dollars to go back into terror. So along the same lines of why, when you're looking at, the Iranian people, I mean, these are people we speak to day in and day out across the population spectrum, for the most part, are against the regime. I mean, why isn't this voice being heard? And I'd like to, ask you about the same thing with Afghanistan. I mean, we're talking about the macro, but let's bring it in a little bit. What percentage of the people do you think, or would you estimate, are for the Taliban, are behind them? Who are those people? And then what percentage of the population are just complying just to survive?
So the vast majority of Afghanistan's people are against the Taliban. And there's many sources I could use. Every year, many NGOs would have surveys conducted inside Afghanistan from 2002 up to 2021. And in every survey every year, only about 17%, 15 to 17% of the population showed support for the Taliban. This is one indication of how much the people inside Afghanistan supported this group. Two, in the past 20 years, the Taliban, a few times a year, would issue statements, would call upon the people to rise up against the US and NATO countries and against the Republic. But we never saw a general uprising inside Afghanistan. We never saw a mass uprising anywhere in the country in the past 20 years. So this is another indication that the population did not support the Taliban. And three, the support the people of Afghanistan showed for democracy in the past 20 years, their participation in elections, their participation in the civil society, and other institutions that came into being after 2001, their support for human rights, women's rights, freedom of speech. And Afghanistan was an example for freedom of speech for the past 20 years before August 15th. But there was false assumptions made in the last few years that Afghanistan's people do not want democracy, that these people are extremists and they support the Taliban. But that wasn't true. Today, the NRF might not have most of Afghanistan's geography. But one thing that we have the Taliban lack is legitimacy, is popular support. Wherever we go, right now, last year, we started from two provinces, from Panjshir province and in a valley in Baghlan province, which is adjacent to Panjshir. Today, we're present in 12 provinces and actively fighting in 6 provinces on a weekly basis. And the people welcome our resistance. They're fed up with terrorists. They want their country liberated. They want democracy. They want their rights. They want their freedom. If they didn't want it, they would have stood against us. They would have joined hands with the Taliban and they would have restrained us. And trust me, inside Afghanistan, if you have the population against you, especially with a strong force that has $7 billion worth of NATO arms today, we wouldn't have been able to expand to 12 provinces today. So we have to support our vision for a democratic and free Afghanistan has support within the population. And as every day passes, we're getting more recruits, we're getting more support, and we're able to spread throughout the country.
Again, this is mind-boggling because I'm listening to you. I mean, we know this, we read this, we understand this, and I'm listening to you as somebody who obviously, lives this day in and day out. And then I think to myself, it's a very political issue here in the United States, as you know. And I want to tell the viewers, Ali is able to travel back and forth as a representative of the NRF to go to Washington, but also be in the Middle East and the surrounding areas to really have a pulse on what's going on, both in Washington and in the region. So he does have that very unique perspective. But the one thing that I know, Ali, that you're aware of is that, in our own legislative bodies, we have congressmen and senators coming out and saying, because of what's happening with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, ISIS-K and Al-Qaeda have a new safe haven, and their influence is going to grow in Afghanistan. And the Taliban's influence is growing, and they're a terrorist arm. And then you have the Democrats who are ignoring it all because they don't want to obviously criticize another one of President Biden's foreign policy moves. So, why? I mean, there's so much logic to what you're saying in the sense that people don't want this. And the same thing, it's very parallel to what we're seeing in Iran. People don't want this. Here's the alternative. Why isn't the United States and international community giving this more support, particularly when the NRF has the ability? They know the people. They're not an imported group. They are, well recognized. As you said, they have the legitimacy. And they represent the people of Afghanistan. We did stories over the last year at the Foreign Desk on, women having to have secret schools. That's one of the articles I'm citing here. Another article on Afghan mothers selling their children to buy food. I mean, this is unbelievable. When you say that over the last 20 years, with the U.S. being there, with there being a presence, that this was not the case. I mean, the fact that it changed so quickly within 1 year only tells us it's going to get much worse going forward.
Of course. Like I said, there were false assumptions about Afghanistan, and then a false narrative, and false narrative being promoted by the Taliban, and wishful thinking on the part of especially Western countries when it came to the Taliban fulfilling their promises when it came to women's rights, human rights, inclusive government, and severing ties with terrorism. We saw none of that be realized by the Taliban and fulfilled by the Taliban. And so basically, everyone is out of touch from reality. The reality on the ground is something else. As every day passes, Al-Qaeda is gaining strength. Other terrorist groups are gaining strength. The Taliban, their rhetoric is changing. It's becoming more radical. I don't know if you've heard the recent speeches of the so-called supreme leader of the Taliban, Mullah Hibatullah. He's been calling for a continuous jihad. So one of his statements was that jihad will continue until the end of times. Our jihad hasn't ended. We have to help our brothers in arms throughout the Muslim world. And so he's trying to export his so-called Islamic Emirate throughout the region and throughout the globe. Recently, a new movement came into being in northern Afghanistan made up of Tajik nationals from Central Asia, from Tajikistan. It's called the Taliban Movement of Tajikistan, and they're aspiring to form an Islamic Emirate in Central Asia and to destabilize Central Asia, which will cause it to pour over into the Caucasus and then towards Eastern Europe and Western Europe and the Middle East. So as every day passes, not only are the former terrorist groups returning to Afghanistan and gaining strength, but we're seeing new terrorist groups also form, and all of them are receiving support and assistance from the Taliban. Right now, the $7 billion worth of arms and equipment are being distributed to these terrorist groups inside Afghanistan. The Taliban are distributing ID cards and passports to these terrorists, foreign terrorists, foreign fighters from other countries. What are they going to do with these passports? Stay and build new lives inside Afghanistan? No, they're going to use it as a tool to infiltrate into other countries. So this is what's happening today in Afghanistan. The Taliban are exploiting Afghanistan's whatever was left for them, and they're using it to strengthen terrorist groups. We're seeing US-made arms end up in places like Kashmir today, end up in the hands of Kashmiri terrorists and other terrorists in the region. So the disastrous withdrawal today has been consequential, and we're seeing its consequences today after a year. And it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse, and we've been warning this for the past year, even before that. And right now, once again, we're warning that there's still time to do something in Afghanistan. And the best option is to strengthen the last remaining anti-terrorist forces in the country, the last remaining democratic forces who are trained in counterterrorism, who are capable of countering terrorists, are capable of liberating their country, because in the past year, with limited amount of resources, they've been able to show that. So if they are supported, if they are assisted, imagine their abilities and their capability of liberating Afghanistan from this nightmare. And we just don't see this understanding elsewhere. And we're still going to try. And I've been reaching out to all countries who share our vision, who are against terrorism, who feel that there is a threat inside Afghanistan.
Sure.
But at the moment, we are not receiving any support or assistance.
You told me your office is in Washington, D.C., that's correct?
Yes.
Has the Biden administration tried to reach out to you at all for any briefings or information or anything you can tell them about what you know?
So we've had indirect engagements, nothing direct, and we do not know the reasons for.
Now, my question is, and I'll tell you my point, because perhaps there's information that you can't share with us, and I don't want for you to compromise, anything that you're not able to. But my question is, we are kind of getting to the point to say, is this by design, or is this for lack of information? And when they have someone like you who's a resource and is a direct representative of this people's movement inside Afghanistan, and you're in Washington, D.C., so it's not like they have to go looking for you, why aren't they using their resources? Why are they defending the Taliban and telling the National Resistance Front to back down? Why are they allowing them to come perhaps to the UN again and take away their sanctioned travel ban? Recently, I'll share it with the audience. As of 2011, the Security Council had sanctions and travel bans on Taliban members, over I think 120 or 30 of them, and that actually a handful of them were recently given special permission to come and to sit down and to have special meetings. Now, this travel ban across the board expired last Friday. On Monday, it came to vote at the United Nations, and guess what? It was a tie. It was a tie. So half of the people voting there believe that the Taliban should travel freely. Why not?
Yes, and well, fortunately, the exemptions were not extended, and I believe this is a very positive development, which we welcome. But I believe that this should stay. The
Right.
Taliban for the
But it
past
is
year
very
had
sorry.
the opportunity. Yes,
Yeah. No, no. My point is that it's very it should be unanimously banned, right?
of
But
course.
it came to a tie, and as you said, thankfully it won't be extended. But is it not shocking that half the voting members believe that they should be allowed to?
Of course, for us, it's surprising and shocking to see the Taliban supported by anyone or allowing anyone allowing the Taliban to have a platform outside of Afghanistan today,
Right. Right.
because they've exploited such platforms for the past few years since they were granted these exemptions, and they started deceiving everyone, especially the United States, in Doha, and with the agreement that was signed, and with the whole process of withdrawing from Afghanistan, and after that as well. So I don't see the point of allowing them to have this platform anymore. A platform there where they're able to deceive different countries, able
Are they
to
really
give.
deceiving though, Ali? I'm sorry to cut you off. My point is this: are they really deceiving? Because the Taliban came in and said, "Oh no, 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 we're the new and improved Taliban. We're not going to do any of that, human rights abuses and things like that. That was the old Taliban. The new Taliban is going to be all modern, and we're going to be good to women, and we're going to be good to this and good to that." And guess what? It didn't take them even weeks or months to start doing a 180 on everything. Women don't go to school for the most part. Women can't leave the home without a chaperone. Women have to dress from head to toe covered. Even the newscasters had to change the way that they anchor the news. And it goes on, and the poverty and the money is not going to the people, and the electricity and everything. So meaning, are they truly deceiving anyone anymore? They're being themselves, but they're still getting the perks. One of the craziest stories we covered here was when Christiana Mampour, a very well-recognized journalist and analyst, more so than that, she's an Iranian woman like myself. So this is why it's mind-boggling to me. In the aftermath of Roe v. Wade that was announced here in the United States, she came out and said, "We have a meeting with the Taliban next week. They're not going to respect us now that we reversed Roe v. Wade." I mean, to give the Taliban this kind of legitimacy and respect when they've proven themselves. It's not like they're trying to hide it. The Taliban are being completely transparent by not giving women any rights. And for Christiana Mampour and many others to defend them and to say, oh, now they're going to judge us because of this reversal of Roe v. Wade, it's mind-boggling. But why is it that they're able to be themselves? Human rights abuses are crazy, but it's not being communicated in a way that is reversing the policy that's coming out of the White House.
Unfortunately, we do see a policy of appeasement towards the Taliban by many countries, and we've been saying this again for the past year. We've been conveying our messages through different lines of communication, different channels to different countries, especially in the West. But unfortunately, we haven't received any response. And again, this policy of appeasement keeps continuing without any change. The Taliban did not fulfill their promises when it came to women's rights, and even the bare minimum was granting the right to attain education for women, and they didn't even do that.
Right. And it's
The
not
same
even
with
it's
yes.
right, and it's not, sorry, we're not even using the leverage for aid to push for that, to say, okay, here's a check, but those women have to go to school. There's no slap on the wrist to say, you have to cut back on some of these human rights abuses, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. The Taliban are meeting with the Chinese, they're meeting with the Iranian government, they're meeting with the Russians, and yet the checks keep coming and the legitimacy keeps coming.
Yes, and we ourselves, we've been waiting for some positive change in policy, but we haven't seen any, especially after Ayman al-Zawahiri was found in the heart of Kabul, a mile away from the former presidential palace. I thought that the reaction would be much greater, but we're just seeing that that is even being ignored today. And they're trying to craft and form a narrative where Ayman al-Zawahiri was a lone al-Qaeda figure and leader. After him, al-Qaeda isn't going to regroup and regain its strength anymore. But we're seeing something different inside Afghanistan. We're seeing as every day passes, a new generation is coming up and receiving legitimacy or gaining strength and are expanding into Afghanistan. A new generation of al-Qaeda building their training camps, cooperating with the Taliban in all four corners of Afghanistan. And again, no reaction, especially after finding the leader of al-Qaeda in the heart of Kabul.
Exactly right. And you saw that PR job by the news, and they wanted to celebrate the fact that the Biden administration captured Zawahiri rather than to say, hello, there's a big network of al-Qaeda here, which is the real story, not just that he was captured. And I'm so sorry, I keep interrupting you and I keep rushing you, but we're almost out of time. But I do want to get to this last question because I brought you here, and this is your time and to use this platform to give us this very critical piece of information. What would be the Santa Claus's list? What would be the ideal list of things that the resistance front would need in order to make a true difference, in order to make gains, and to have perhaps a chance at getting Afghanistan back?
So what we need is, our forces today have the morale and motivation and the ability to defend their people, their values, their rights, and to fight for their country's liberation. They have shown that, they've proved that in the past year. We have strong leadership, so we have all of that. What we don't have is, one, the political support of the international community. Stop the policy of appeasement towards the Taliban. That's what, first and foremost, that's one of our main asks from the international community. Two is, once again, we're not fighting a civil war. We're fighting the continuation of the global war on terror. So this has to be an international effort. In order for us to fight terrorist groups who have more than $7 billion worth of US and NATO arms, we need something to acquire an edge in the battlefield. And I'm sure the international community understands what our specific needs are when I do convey this. So we need capabilities in order to accelerate Afghanistan's liberation. Without material support from the international community and regional countries who do feel threatened from terrorism inside Afghanistan, we will be able to liberate our country gradually. We will continue our resistance, fight for our freedom, fight for our right. But to accelerate this fight for liberation, for democracy and freedom, and to prevent a catastrophe, a terrorist attack like 9/11 and other terrorist attacks that happen, we have to accelerate this struggle, this resistance, and that will only come if there's an international effort helping and supporting the National Resistance Front.
Okay, you heard it there. We're lucky to have you as an asset to tell us really what the people of Afghanistan are experiencing, what they're telling you, what the fighters are willing to do, and that they're there. They just need the international community support. It's as easy as that. If only Washington would be listening in on this conversation. Thank you so much, Ali. Be safe. Please come back onto the show and keep updating us on what's going on the ground there, and give the people of Afghanistan our love and support for a better future. We're thinking of them.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
And to all of you at home would like to subscribe to our podcast, you can do so on YouTube, youtube.com/Lisa Daftari, or on any of the platforms where you get your podcasts. We're on all of them. And if you'd like to subscribe to our daily top 10 email to stay on top of all the daily news stories, you can go to foreigndesknews.com and sign up there. Thank you so much.